Hey guys. Tonight we step quietly into a world where voices are hushed not by choice, but by tradition, where what is unsaid speaks louder than any shouted word. Imagine a marriage in ancient China, not as a joyful union, but as a silent pact sealed by custom and expectation, especially for women. Here, your voice, as a woman, is not meant to ripple across the household or echo beyond the walls. It is meant to be contained, folded tightly like a secret letter hidden beneath the floorboards. This is the paradox that sets our story in motion. In a society where women were expected to be silent and obedient, their thoughts and feelings found refuge in whispers, written between lines, disguised in poetic metaphor, and passed hand to hand like forbidden fruit. The story you're about to hear doesn't shout, it hides. It waits, and it reveals something we may not want to remember about human longing and repression. And just so you know, you probably won't survive this gentle uncovering unscathed, because once you notice how these women carved out secret spaces in a world designed to silence them, it changes how you see silence forever. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always fascinating to feel connected across time zones through stories like this. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. In ancient China, marriage was not simply a personal contract between two individuals. It was a social and familial obligation woven tightly into the fabric of society. From the moment a girl was betrothed, her future was effectively sealed, and her voice, her opinions, desires, and frustrations were expected to dissolve into the background of the household. Marriage was a public transaction designed to maintain family honor, secure alliances, and continue bloodlines. Women were to be seen but not heard, especially once wed. This silence was enforced not just by husbands, but by the entire extended family and societal norms rooted deeply in Confucian values. The ideal wife was obedient, modest, and diligent, speaking only when spoken to, and never questioning the established order. It's almost ironic how these very strictures, which sought to erase a woman's presence as an independent thinker or feeling being, paradoxically birthed an entire subculture of secret communication. You see, silence was not just absence, it was fertile ground for coded voices to grow. These early marriage customs laid the groundwork for a hidden literary tradition, women writing secret letters after marriage. These letters were not casual notes, but carefully crafted vessels of meaning, loaded with emotions and ideas that could never be voiced openly. Their existence is a quiet rebellion, a sliver of resistance carved out in the tight spaces between social expectation and personal truth. Historians still argue whether these secret letters originated primarily as tools of romantic expression, emotional survival, or covert protest. The reality is probably all three intertwined, as women used writing not just to speak, but to live. Unlike public literature, these letters were ephemeral, meant only for the eyes of a chosen few, and therefore escaped the censoring gaze of patriarchal society. They are a testament to the human urge to connect, to express, and to claim a voice, even when the world insists on muting you. The silence imposed on women after marriage was not a gentle quiet, but a stifling hush that invaded every corner of their daily lives. A bride left her natal home to live under the strict supervision of her husband's family, often in a crowded household where privacy was a luxury. Her role was clearly defined: manage the household, bear sons, and serve her in-laws with unwavering loyalty. There was little space for personal reflection or emotional expression. You might picture her days filled with endless chores, eyes downcast, words measured and limited, a presence felt but never fully acknowledged. Yet beneath this surface, her mind was alive with thoughts, fears, and hopes that demanded a channel. This internal world found expression in secret letters, small, fragile papers slipped under doors, hidden within clothing, or passed covertly through trusted servants. The act of writing became a lifeline, a quiet way to reclaim a sense of self amid the vast silencing imposed by tradition. While the public role of women was circumscribed, their private inner lives were rich and complex. Secret letters allowed them to navigate this dual existence. These letters were often written in the dim light of early mornings or late nights, when the household settled into sleep and eyes turned away. Imagine the hush of a room where a woman's brush strokes on paper are the only sound. Each character a whisper of feeling carefully cloaked in metaphor and allusion. The content could range from tender love notes to coded complaints about neglect or mistreatment. Sometimes they were crafted in poetic language so ornate that, even if intercepted, the true meaning might elude prying eyes. The use of allegory and symbolic imagery created a layered dialogue between writer and recipient, a secret dance of words that only the initiated could fully understand. It's tempting to romanticize these secret letters as merely expressions of forbidden love, but they served multiple purposes. For some women, writing was a means to sustain relationships torn apart by physical distance, such as when husbands were away on official duties or military campaigns. For others, letters were a subtle form of emotional resistance, a way to assert individuality and maintain sanity in the face of isolation. The danger of discovery was real and terrifying. A letter found by an angry father-in-law or jealous servant could provoke severe punishment, social disgrace, or worse. This risk added urgency and tension to every word penned, underscoring the courage required to communicate under such constraints. Women's secret letters were acts of defiance wrapped in elegance, fragile rebellions that flickered in the shadows of a rigid social order. Historians continue to debate the extent to which these letters influenced broader cultural or literary developments. Some argue that they contributed to the flourishing of women's poetry and prose during certain dynastic periods, suggesting a hidden lineage of female literary tradition. Others see them as isolated acts of personal communication, significant primarily for their social and emotional impact rather than their artistic merit. Whatever the case, the existence of these letters challenges the simplistic narrative that ancient Chinese women were voiceless and passive. Instead, it reveals a vibrant subculture of expression operating beneath the surface, where women's words were alive, even if carefully concealed. In understanding this early marriage and female silence, you begin to see how these secret letters emerge not just as private communications, but as a testament to resilience. They are the traces of women who refused complete erasure, who found ways to speak without shouting, to connect without exposure. You might even think of these letters as early whispers of what we now call agency-soft, yet insistent claims to presence in a world that preferred their absence. And that, my friend, sets the stage for everything that follows. We will trace how these letters were born, what materials they used, how their coded language worked, and what risks the writers faced. We'll see how love, longing, and protest intertwined in these hidden texts, and how education, Confucian ideals, and social networks shape this secret tradition. So as you settle deeper into your pillow, consider this: the silence that seems so absolute is often a canvas for hidden life, and the quietest voice may carry the most urgent message. Tonight, you will hear that message, whispered across centuries, from women whose words refuse to be silenced, even in silence itself. You already know the silence that surrounded women after marriage in ancient China wasn't mere absence of sound, but a thick curtain drawn tight around their lives. Into this silence, secret letters quietly bloomed, delicate and clandestine, like wildflowers thriving in cracks of stone. The birth of these letters was less a sudden invention than an organic response to necessity, a hidden flowering of communication born from the suffocating stillness that marriage imposed. When a woman left her childhood home, she was thrust into a world where speaking freely was forbidden, but the human heart's needs, love, friendship, hope, refused to be smothered. So women turned to the written word, crafting messages not for public eyes, but for trusted souls. These first secret letters were more than just notes. They were tiny lifeboats launched in a sea of silence, carrying fragments of identity and emotion across the distances that separated women from those they loved or trusted. Historians still argue whether the earliest of these letters emerged primarily as romantic tokens, exchanged between spouses, or as practical communications among women within the household's inner quarters. Some suggest they started as simple messages, quick words of reassurance, or coded instructions slipped between handmaidens and concubines, gradually evolving into more elaborate correspondences full of poetic metaphors and hidden meanings. Others propose that these letters were initially tools of social navigation, ways for women to seek counsel, share news, or support each other within the rigid constraints of family hierarchy. Whatever the precise origin, These writings embody the paradox of a culture that prized silence from women, yet could not extinguish their desire to be heard. The secret letter was the soft, resilient voice of that desire, a language born from absence and shaped by necessity. What's fascinating is how these letters carried multiple layers of meaning, designed to conceal as much as to reveal. Early on, women learned to weave their words carefully, so the letters might seem innocuous or even meaningless to any unintended reader. They employed classical literary references, allusions to nature, and poetic symbolism drawn from shared cultural knowledge. A simple phrase about the blooming of a flower or the shifting of seasons might in fact hint at longing, betrayal, or hope for reunion. This double coding transformed secret letters into cryptic art forms where every word counted, and every image bore a hidden truth. It's almost like an ancient game of emotional hide-and-seek played in ink. Such intricate layers made the letters both a sanctuary and a risk, a way to speak freely, and yet a trap if decoded by the wrong eyes. The materials and formats of these secret letters also speak volumes about their origins and evolution. Early on, women had limited access to writing supplies. Paper was expensive and precious, and brushes and ink were tools carefully controlled. Often, messages were written on scraps of silk, thin slips of bamboo, or even folded into fans and handkerchiefs. Sometimes they took the form of poems, sometimes of riddles, and sometimes simple notes, but always with a sense of urgency and secrecy. The act of writing itself was an intimate ritual, performed under the watchful eyes of the household or in stolen moments of privacy. You can almost feel the tension in the quiet rustle of a brush on silk, the hurried folding of a note before slipping it into a sleeve. These tactile, fragile materials amplified the vulnerability and preciousness of the messages they carried. The very nature of these early secret letters means they have rarely survived the passage of time. Their ephemeral forms, paper, silk, bamboo, were often discarded or destroyed, and their clandestine use discouraged public preservation. Yet through references in poetry, diaries, and occasional recovered texts, scholars piece together the contours of this hidden literary world. It's like assembling a puzzle from fragments scattered across centuries, each piece revealing the texture of female experience once concealed beneath patriarchal silence. This scarcity only adds to the mystique and poignancy of these letters, making each surviving example a precious window into lives lived in shadow and silence. While the earliest secret letters were likely simple and utilitarian, their form soon became intertwined with the rich tradition of Chinese poetry and calligraphy. Women, especially those of the literate elite, began to adopt classical styles and allusions, embedding their personal messages within the accepted artistic conventions of the time. This blending of private communication with public art forms is a fascinating paradox. Secret letters became a way for women to participate, if indirectly, in the broader literary culture that largely excluded them. Their coded language allowed them to navigate the narrow corridors between obedience and self-expression. Some historians suggest that the refinement of this letter-writing tradition contributed subtly to the development of genres such as sea and few poetry, where emotion and nuance thrive in layers of meaning. The secrecy of these letters also meant that women developed networks of trust and solidarity within the household and beyond. A handmaid might act as messenger between a married woman and her natal family, or between two women sharing confidences in a world that forbade their open friendship. Letters passed quietly from hand to hand, their contents known only to a select few. These networks reinforced female bonds and provided a counterpoint to the male-dominated social order. They were not merely romantic or familial. They were social lifelines, emotional lifebuoys in a sea of isolation. And in this delicate web, the secret letter was both a weapon and a shield, a way to assert identity and protect oneself in a world where being heard was dangerous. As you imagine the emergence of these secret letters, picture the dim inner chambers of a traditional Chinese home, paper folded beneath a hairpin, a poem hidden inside a silk pouch, whispered instructions carried by a loyal servant. These images are more than quaint historical curiosities. They are evidence of human resilience, creativity, and the eternal search for connection. The birth of secret letters in marriage was not just a cultural artifact, but a living testimony to women's enduring spirit in the face of silencing. It reminds us that where speech is forbidden, the written word will find a way to bloom. In the next sections, we'll explore how these letters were crafted with special materials and coded language, how they balanced risk and reward, and how they embodied the complex interplay between love, protest, and survival. We'll also look at how education and Confucian ideals influenced this secret tradition, and how women's networks helped these letters circulate. But for now, hold on to this fragile beginning, the moment when silence first gave birth to secret voices written in ink, threads of light woven through the shadowed fabric of ancient Chinese marriage. As you settle deeper into this quiet world of secret letters, you start to see that the materials and tools used to write them are as important as the words themselves. In ancient China, writing wasn't just about putting thoughts on paper. It was a tactile, intimate act, shaped by the very physical objects at hand. Women who crafted these secret letters often had to be resourceful, working within strict limitations of what materials were accessible, affordable, and allowed within their social standing. Paper, for instance, was a precious commodity in many periods. It wasn't the disposable, ubiquitous stuff you grab from a printer today. High-quality paper could be costly, so women sometimes resorted to alternatives like silk, bamboo slips, or even wooden leaves to carry their messages. Each choice brought a different texture and permanence to the letter, influencing not only how it was written, but also how it was hidden or delivered. Imagine a woman carefully dipping her brush into ink made from soot and animal glue, the brush tip soft and supple beneath her fingers. The smell of ink, the slight resistance of the brush on silk or fragile paper, the careful folding of a letter into a tiny square, all these physical sensations heightened the emotional weight of the message. Sometimes, letters were written on fan surfaces, which could be discreetly carried or folded away. In more covert instances, words might be hidden in embroidery, or stitched as secret messages onto clothing or linens, blending art with communication. Historians still debate the full extent to which textiles and other non-paper media served as letter carriers. But surviving examples of coded embroidery suggest a rich interplay between different crafts and secret communication. This blending of mediums added an extra layer of concealment, making the letter a tactile, wearable secret. Because of the fragility of these materials, the act of writing itself was a performance of care and urgency. Writing a secret letter was often done in stolen moments late at night when the household was asleep, in the quiet moments before dawn, or hidden away in a garden pavilion. Privacy was scarce, so women developed rituals around secrecy, a specific place to write, a trusted servant to deliver the note, a secret code to disguise the message. The very act of creating the letter required courage, because being caught could mean humiliation, punishment, or worse. Sometimes, women used invisible inks made from plant extracts or natural dyes that only became visible under certain conditions. The use of such methods highlights the lengths to which these women went to protect their voices in a world that demanded silence. The tools themselves, brushes, inkstones, paperweights, were imbued with symbolic as well as practical significance. In Confucian society, calligraphy was considered a high art, a reflection of moral character and education. Women, especially those from elite families, learned the delicate strokes of brushwork as part of their upbringing, but their calligraphy was rarely showcased publicly. Instead, it became a private language, a way to convey emotion and personality in secret letters. The style of a woman's handwriting could betray mood or intent. A bold stroke might signal passion or anger, while a delicate, flowing script suggested tenderness or longing. This visual language was as important as the text itself, adding a layer of emotional nuance that words alone could not capture. Calligraphy turned secret letters into miniature artworks, fragile expressions of self hidden from the world. Interestingly, the scarcity of resources sometimes led to innovative practices. Scraps of paper or silk might be reused, carefully erased, or overwritten to conserve materials. Women might fold letters into intricate shapes, using origami-like techniques to create secret compartments within notes. Some letters included pictograms or symbols drawn alongside text to provide clues or disguise meanings. These practical constraints fueled creativity, turning the simple act of writing into a nuanced craft. You could say that the limitations of materials sparked a kind of literary alchemy, transforming humble supplies into precious vessels of hidden communication. It's a reminder that silence and scarcity often birth unexpected beauty. Yet, despite the artistry and care, the physical vulnerability of these letters was a constant source of anxiety. A letter accidentally dropped, seen by an unintended reader, or intercepted by a suspicious family member could shatter a woman's fragile world. The fear of exposure shaped every choice: what to write, how to write it, where to hide it, and to whom to send it. Some women developed sophisticated systems of coded language, using references only understandable to their correspondence or encrypting messages within layers of poetic metaphor. This cryptic style allowed them to communicate complex feelings while maintaining plausible deniability if the letter was found. It's a testament to their intelligence and courage that they managed such linguistic finesse under pressure. The tension between fragility and strength in these letters mirrors the precarious position of the women who wrote them. On one hand, their words were delicate, written on materials that could be torn, burned, or lost. On the other hand, those very words carried immense power, offering hope, solace, and resistance in a world that sought to silence them. It's no coincidence that many surviving examples of secret letters are prized not only for their historical value, but for the emotional intensity they contain. Each stroke of brush or pen is a whisper from a time when the written word was one of the few tools a woman could wield to assert her presence. The use of special materials also intersected with social class and geography. Elite women had more access to fine silk, quality brushes, and instruction in calligraphy, allowing their letters to take on more artistic and coded forms. In contrast, women of lower social status might rely on simpler materials or oral transmission of messages disguised as poetry or song. Regional differences also influenced the kinds of materials used and the style of secret letters. For instance, in southern China, where silk production was prominent, secret letters on silk were more common, while in northern regions, bamboo slips or paper might be more typical. This variation reflects the rich diversity of practices across China's vast cultural landscape. Even the method of delivering these secret letters was influenced by their physical form. Lightweight silk notes could be easily concealed in sleeves or hairpins, while sturdier paper letters required more careful handling. Trusted servants, family members, or even messengers disguised as merchants might carry letters between households. Delivery was a delicate affair. Timing and discretion were crucial to avoid detection. This added another dimension of risk and trust to the secret correspondence. Letters were not just words on a page, but fragile threads linking people separated by social constraints, distance, or enforced silence. As you imagine these secret letters, folded silk, ink-stained paper, brushstrokes trembling with emotion, you can almost feel the pulse of hidden lives beneath the austere surface of ancient Chinese society. The materials and methods used to create them were as much part of the message as the text itself, embodying the tension between visibility and invisibility, voice and silence, connection and separation. They remind us that even in worlds designed to suppress, human creativity and yearning find ways to speak. So next time you hold a pen or type a message on your phone, pause to consider this: these secret letters were once the lifelines of women whose words might have been erased had they spoken aloud. Their fragile tools bore the weight of defiance and desire, crafting invisible bridges across silence, and that delicate, beautiful tension between the material and the message is what makes this history not just a story of the past, but a whisper that still resonates in the quiet spaces of human communication. As your eyes adjust to the soft flicker of candlelight in these hidden chambers, you begin to notice that the language of secret letters in ancient China was far from straightforward. Instead, it unfolded like a finely woven tapestry of code and symbolism, where every word, phrase, and image carried a double meaning designed to protect its true intent from prying eyes. This use of metaphor and veiled references was not merely poetic flair, but a necessary camouflage, an elegant shield against the rigid scrutiny of patriarchal society. Women, barred from speaking openly about their feelings or grievances, turned to poetic metaphors and visual codes as their clandestine dialect, a secret language spoken in shadows that only trusted recipients could decode. It's like learning a whisper's grammar, where silence speaks louder than words. The smallest phrase hides worlds beneath. One common technique was embedding messages in nature imagery, a tradition deeply rooted in Chinese poetry. References to blooming flowers, changing seasons, or wandering birds were more than decorative. They served as symbols for longing, separation, or hope. A letter mentioning the wilting lotus might signal fading affection or loneliness, while a rising moon could evoke reunion or silent tears shed in the night. Such imagery allowed women to express complex emotions in a socially acceptable way that simultaneously conveyed intimacy to the recipient. The beauty of nature became a safe metaphorical landscape where forbidden thoughts could flourish without overt exposure. You might say the flora and fauna of these letters acted like a secret garden behind a locked gate, accessible only to those who held the key of shared understanding. Beyond nature, women used cultural symbols drawn from literature, mythology, and Confucian ideals. For example, a reference to the legendary butterfly lovers might hint at passionate yet tragic romance, while invoking the jade pendant could signify purity or fidelity. These symbols were deeply embedded in the collective consciousness, allowing writers and readers to communicate on multiple levels. A casual observer would see only a well-phrased compliment or a polite inquiry, but between the lines lay a coded conversation rich with emotional and social nuance. Historians still debate the extent to which these symbols were standardized or personalized, but it's clear that women developed sophisticated repertoires of imagery to suit different contexts and relationships. This symbolic layering was a form of linguistic artistry born out of necessity, a graceful way to speak without speaking. The use of homophones and puns also added a playful yet secretive dimension to these letters. Chinese, with its many words sharing identical or similar sounds but different meanings, was ripe for linguistic puzzles. Women might use a word that sounded like love, but actually meant longing, or replace a character for flower with one meaning promise. Such wordplay allowed letters to masquerade as innocent notes, while hiding passionate or critical sentiments. The recipient's ability to read between the sounds was crucial, and shared cultural literacy created an intimate bond of trust and understanding. This clever use of language made every letter a riddle and every reading a private revelation, deepening the emotional connection while maintaining discretion. Visual codes extended beyond language into the physical layout and decoration of letters, the placement of characters, spacing, and the use of seals or stamps could carry hidden messages. For instance, a letter folded in a certain way might signify urgency or caution. A red ink seal could indicate a message of love or distress. Sometimes, the brush strokes themselves were intentionally varied to convey mood bold. Heavy lines might denote anger or determination, while light, flowing strokes expressed tenderness or sorrow. The calligraphy was thus both text and image, a multi-dimensional code where style and content intertwined. These subtle signals transformed letters into living artifacts, breathing with the writer's emotions even as they concealed their deeper meanings from the uninitiated. One particularly fascinating practice was the creation of hidden text within letters. This involved writing messages that could only be revealed under special conditions, for example, using invisible ink made from plant juices that became visible only when heated or exposed to light. Some letters contained palimpsests, where a seemingly ordinary text hid another beneath, readable only by tracing the brushstrokes carefully or holding the paper against the light. These techniques elevated secret letter writing to a form of cryptography, blending art, science, and emotion. You can imagine the thrill and risk involved in such exchanges, where a letter might appear harmless to an overseer but held dangerous truths for the recipient. All these layers of code and symbolism served a dual purpose: to protect the writer and receiver from social repercussions, and to create a private world of communication rich with shared meaning. The letters became sanctuaries of intimacy in an otherwise public and controlled existence. They allowed women to express affection, grief, joy, and anger in ways impossible in spoken conversation. In this hidden language, silence was not absence but presence of thought, feeling, and resistance. It was a quiet rebellion, one stroke of the brush at a time, against the constraints imposed by gender and tradition. However, the very complexity of these codes also meant that letters required careful interpretation. Misreading a metaphor or pun could lead to confusion, offense, or unintended exposure. This risk made letter writing a skill often taught and refined among women within trusted social circles. Older women might mentor younger ones in the art of coded writing, passing down traditions of symbolism and discretion. These teachings formed an informal curriculum of emotional literacy, emphasizing not only language, but social navigation and survival. The ability to craft and decode secret letters was a kind of power, subtle yet profound, allowing women to maintain agency in a world that denied them voice. This coded correspondence also sparked fascinating debates among scholars. Some argued that these secret letters constituted a form of proto-feminist expression, a way for women to assert their identities and emotions despite systemic oppression. Others cautioned against romanticizing them too much, suggesting that these letters could also reinforce social norms by encouraging silence and indirectness rather than direct confrontation. Still, the very existence of such elaborate coding points to a complex interplay between constraint and creativity, silence and voice. These letters are historical artifacts of resilience, revealing the ingenuity with which women navigated their worlds. So, as you imagine yourself deciphering one of these secret letters, perhaps unfolding a thin silk slip, or tracing faded brushstrokes, you become a participant in a centuries-old game of hidden meanings and whispered truths. The poetic metaphors and visual codes are not just linguistic tricks, but lifelines, fragile yet enduring threads that connect women across time and space. They remind us that where overt speech is denied, the human spirit invents new ways to speak, hiding its truth in plain sight. And if you think this sounds a bit like an ancient escape room, you're not far off. These women mastered the art of speaking without speaking, writing without revealing, loving without exposing. Their secret language was a sanctuary and a weapon, a shield and a bridge. It is this beautiful tension between concealment and revelation that makes the story of these secret letters so haunting and so profoundly human. In the shadows of these secret correspondences lurked a very real and palpable danger, the risk of discovery. You might think that such delicate letters, wrapped in metaphor and hidden in silk folds, would provide sufficient protection against prying eyes, but the stakes were far higher and more immediate than you might expect. For a woman in ancient China, the unmasking of a secret letter could bring ruin not just upon herself, but also upon her entire family. Social order was maintained through strict control over behavior and communication, especially for women whose perceived virtue was tied to family honor. A discovered secret letter might be taken as proof of disobedience, infidelity, or rebellious intent, any one of which could trigger harsh punishment, including physical chastisement, exile, or even death in extreme cases. The consequences extended beyond the individual, affecting the fragile reputations and alliances upon which families depended. This risk cast a shadow over every word written, every note passed. The household itself was a surveillance state of sorts, where family elders, servants, and even siblings could act as informants, either out of loyalty or suspicion. Privacy was scarce, and a woman's movements, conversations, and possessions were often subject to scrutiny. Letters were intercepted, read, and sometimes destroyed by watchful eyes eager to maintain control. A careless slip, a note left too long in plain sight, a message delivered by an untrustworthy servant could expose a woman's secrets with devastating consequences. Because of this, women developed intricate methods of concealment, such as hiding letters in hollowed-out objects, sewing them into clothing seams, or encoding messages in invisible ink. Every act of writing was shadowed by fear, every delivery a calculated risk. It's a reminder that freedom of expression was not a right, but a precious and dangerous privilege. This atmosphere of risk shaped not only the content of secret letters, but also their very existence. Some women refrained from writing altogether, fearing the repercussions, while others accepted the dangers as necessary for survival. The act of writing became an act of bravery, a whispered rebellion against the forces of control. You might imagine the pounding heart of a woman as she pressed brush to silk, knowing that a single mistake could unravel her carefully constructed world. This tension between desire and danger imbued each letter with urgency and poignancy, turning the written word into a lifeline amid a threatening silence. The risk extended beyond family members to broader societal structures. Officials and local authorities, especially during periods of stricter moral policing, could punish women accused of impropriety, indicated by secret correspondence. Laws regulating women's behavior, dress, and speech were enforced not only to control individuals but to maintain social harmony and hierarchy. Secret letters, by their very nature, defied these regulations and were therefore seen as subversive. The discovery of illicit letters might lead to public humiliation, fines, or worse, depending on the political climate. This reality made the practice of secret letter writing an act not just of personal expression but of quiet political resistance, a subtle undermining of a system designed to erase female agency. Interestingly, the consequences of discovery could vary significantly depending on the content and context of the letters. A romantic note might be scandalous but sometimes forgiven or hidden away, especially if it involved high-status individuals. In contrast, letters containing veiled criticism of the husband, father-in-law, or household rules were far more dangerous and could provoke severe reprisals. Some letters included coded complaints about neglect or abuse, and their exposure risked intensifying the oppression they sought to resist. This layered danger added complexity to the decision to write and the manner of expression. Women had to balance the need to communicate with the imperative to protect themselves and their families, a delicate dance of secrecy and survival. Despite these dangers, secret letters persisted across centuries, testifying to the extraordinary courage and resilience of women, their willingness to risk punishment to speak, love, or protest in coded language highlights the profound human need for connection and self-expression. These letters were not just furtive notes, but acts of defiance, flashes of light in a world that demanded darkness. The risk made the reward sweeter, a whispered confession, a shared sorrow. A coded promise carried more weight precisely because it was hidden and fragile. The social repercussions of discovered letters also reflected the complex power dynamics within the household. A woman's status could be precarious, especially if she was a bride in a new family. Her voice was marginalized, and her loyalty was constantly tested. A letter seen as disloyal or disrespectful could undermine her position, jeopardizing her security and future. Conversely, secret letters could be a way to navigate these dynamics, subtly offering apologies, seeking forgiveness, or reinforcing bonds under the cover of metaphor. The constant negotiation of power and survival within the domestic sphere meant that secret correspondence was both a tool and a risk, shaping relationships in nuanced ways. Historians still debate how often secret letters were discovered and what typical punishments entailed. Records of such events are rare and often veiled in euphemism or omission, reflecting the societal tendency to suppress inconvenient truths. Some accounts suggest that exposure led to harsh physical punishment, banishment, or divorce, while others point to more muted forms of social ostracism or loss of favor. The lack of consistent documentation leaves us with tantalizing glimpses rather than full pictures, reinforcing the idea that these letters operated largely in the shadows, both literally and figuratively. This silence in the historical record is itself a testament to the power of patriarchal control and the fragility of female voices. The danger of discovery also influenced the networks through which letters were exchanged. Women often relied on trusted intermediaries, servants, younger siblings, or close friends whose loyalty was critical. These messengers risked their own safety in carrying secret letters, and breaches of trust could have catastrophic consequences. Because of this, letter delivery became a secret ritual, involving coded signals, discreet timing, and careful handoffs. Sometimes, letters were hidden within gifts, sewn into clothing, or disguised as mundane household items to avoid detection. This choreography of secrecy added a performative aspect to the practice, turning communication into an elaborate dance of discretion and trust. This perilous environment fostered a culture of vigilance and discretion among women. They learned to read signs of suspicion, to test the trustworthiness of messengers, and to conceal their writing implements and letters with care. The act of writing became not just a literary skill, but a survival tactic, intertwined with social intelligence and emotional awareness. You can imagine the whispered conversations about whom to trust, the anxious moments waiting for a response, and the relief when a letter safely reached its recipient. These dynamics transformed secret letter writing into a communal act of resistance and support, binding women together in shared secrecy. Ultimately, the social risks of discovery underscored the extraordinary courage embedded in every secret letter. These writings were fragile threads of connection, spun in the face of oppression, danger, and silence. They remind us that communication is not just about words, but about trust, risk, and hope. In the shadows where these letters were written and exchanged, women forged spaces of voice and presence, defying a world that sought to erase them. And it is in this tension between silence and speech, risk and reward, that the true power of these secret letters emerges, whispering across time to remind us of the indomitable human spirit. As you lean closer to these whispered stories, you begin to understand how the secret letters became vessels, not only of coded communication, but of deep emotional expression, particularly of love and longing. In a world where public displays of affection were restrained by social norms, and marriage was often more duty than a romance, women found in their secret correspondence a rare sanctuary to articulate feelings otherwise suppressed. Their letters were layered with tenderness, yearning, and sometimes aching sorrow, written in the delicate language of metaphor and veiled sentiment. Love, in this hidden world, was not shouted from the rooftops, but murmured in the quiet curves of a brushstroke, folded gently into silk, and carried through the corridors of a guarded household. These letters became a secret garden where desire bloomed amidst thorns of duty and silence. The expressions of love and longing within secret letters took many forms. Some were tender poems addressed to absent husbands, who might be away for months or years on official duty, military service, or family business. The distance between spouses turned the written word into a lifeline, each letter a thread weaving together hearts separated by geography and circumstance. These letters conveyed longing not just for physical presence but for emotional connection, a yearning for intimacy denied by the strictures of marriage. Women wrote of sleepless nights, dreams of reunion, and the pain of separation using symbolic imagery, such as the moon's pale light or the drifting petals of a flower, to evoke feelings too profound or delicate for direct expression. The act of writing was itself an act of hope, a declaration that love endured despite barriers. Yet love in these letters was rarely simple or idealized. Many contained layers of ambivalence, reflecting the complexities of married life in a patriarchal society. Women might express frustration at neglect, loneliness in crowded households, or sadness over unfulfilled desires. Their words could carry quiet reproach or subtle hints of dissatisfaction, carefully cloaked in metaphor to avoid detection. In some letters, longing mingled with resignation, as women grappled with the realities of their constrained roles. The dual nature of these expressions, hope entwined with sorrow, adds a haunting depth to the correspondence, revealing the emotional resilience required to navigate love's complexities within imposed silence. Beyond their husbands, secret letters often conveyed affection toward children, sisters, and close female friends. These relationships were vital emotional anchors, and letters to family members expressed tender concern, encouragement, and shared joys or sorrows. In a culture where women's lives were closely intertwined, these letters created intimate spaces for connection and mutual support. The language of love extended beyond romantic bonds to encompass familial and communal ties, reinforcing the networks of care that sustained women. Through this broader lens, secret letters functioned as emotional lifelines, nurturing relationships that were often marginalized in the public sphere. The poetic nature of these letters reflects the centrality of literature and art in expressing love and longing in ancient China. Women's education, where available, included instruction in classical poetry and calligraphy, which they adapted to their private communications. The intertwining of literary tradition with personal sentiment created letters that were not only emotional, but also artistic, blending form and feeling. This fusion elevated the act of letter writing beyond mere communication to a performance of identity and desire. Each poem or metaphor was a carefully chosen symbol, a brushstroke painting emotions that could not be safely spoken aloud. The artistry of these letters gave women a voice that was at once private and powerful. Historians still debate how freely women could express themselves in these letters. Considering the strict social codes governing female behavior, some argue that the need for concealment limited emotional honesty, forcing women to adopt conventional tropes and cautious language. Others contend that the very act of secret letter writing allowed for unprecedented freedom of expression within a controlled environment. The tension between self-censorship and authentic voice is part of what makes these letters so compelling. They are fragments of interior lives glimpsed through the veil of metaphor, revealing both what was said and what was held back. This complexity invites readers to listen carefully to the silences between words, to hear the echoes of feelings that defied suppression. The emotional power of these letters also came from their role as a counterpoint to the official narratives of marriage and womanhood. Publicly, women were expected to embody virtues of obedience, modesty, and self-sacrifice. Privately, their letters revealed the often untold stories of loneliness, desire, and resistance. The secret correspondence offered a rare glimpse into the contradictions of women's experiences, the gap between societal ideals and personal reality. Through their hidden words, women asserted their humanity and complexity, refusing to be reduced to silent figures. This subtle but profound assertion of emotional life is one of the enduring legacies of secret letter writing. In some cases, letters conveyed a kind of coded dialogue between lovers, with shared metaphors and symbols creating an intimate language understood only by them. These correspondences often celebrated small joys, an upcoming visit, a favorite flower, a memory of laughter offering moments of tenderness amid hardship. The anticipation of reading or receiving a letter added a layer of excitement and comfort to daily life, transforming routine moments into occasions of emotional connection. This aspect of letter writing underscores its function not just as communication, but as a form of emotional sustenance, nourishing relationships in a world where physical and social barriers were formidable. Interestingly, the secrecy and symbolism in love letters also reflect broader cultural attitudes toward emotion and expression. Chinese literary tradition often valued subtlety, restraint, and indirectness as markers of refinement, and these aesthetic principles influenced private correspondence. Love was to be expressed with delicacy and suggestion rather than overt passion. This cultural context shaped how women articulated their feelings, blending personal emotion with socially acceptable forms. The result was a rich tapestry of meaning that invited careful reading and interpretation, reinforcing the intimacy and exclusivity of secret letters. As you imagine the delicate brushstrokes forming poems of longing on silk or paper, you can almost feel the bittersweet ache in the writer's heart, a yearning made more poignant by the necessity of concealment. These letters are echoes of love whispered through time, fragile yet enduring, carrying the voices of women who dared to speak their desire in a world that demanded silence. They remind us that love, in its many forms, often finds its most profound expression in the spaces between words, in the coded language of longing and hope. So as you rest tonight, think of these secret letters as silent songs sung softly in the dark, offering a glimpse of the tender humanity that persisted behind closed doors. Their hidden verses invite us to listen not just to what was written, but to what was felt beneath the surface. And in that listening, we honor the courage and creativity of women whose voices, though muted by tradition, still speak to us across centuries. The secret letters you've been following were more than mere notes. They were emotional lifelines for women often trapped in the isolating confines of patriarchal households. Imagine a daily existence where your movements are monitored, your speech restricted, and your desires relegated to the shadows. In this world, secret letters became the fragile threads that connected women to the larger human experience of connection, empathy, and understanding. When physical touch or open conversation was impossible, a written word veiled in metaphor yet brimming with meaning offered a vital conduit for emotional survival. These letters were not just outlets for feelings, but essential mechanisms for coping with loneliness, disappointment, and repression. Without them, many women might have been swallowed whole by silence. The emotional isolation of married women in ancient China was profound. Upon entering their husband's household, they often found themselves surrounded by strangers, removed from the comfort of their natal family and familiar social circles. Their daily lives were consumed by chores, childcare, and adherence to strict etiquette, with little opportunity for personal expression or companionship. Social norms discouraged open communication, especially emotional sharing, which was seen as inappropriate or even dangerous. This isolation was exacerbated by the hierarchical nature of the household, where elder women and in-laws wielded authority, further limiting a young bride's agency. In such a stifling environment, secret letters offered a rare and precious means to reach beyond the physical and emotional walls enclosing them. These letters functioned as a kind of emotional insurance policy, small, fragile acts of connection that sustained women through difficult times. Receiving a letter meant more than just reading words. It was an affirmation that someone cared, that one's feelings mattered despite the barriers of distance and silence. The anticipation of a response, the trust in a shared secret, created a sense of belonging and hope. For women separated from spouses by official duties or long absences, letters were lifelines, bridging the gulf of separation with ink and metaphor. The exchange of secret letters nurtured intimacy and reassurance, counteracting the loneliness that could otherwise feel crushing. But secret letters were not only about maintaining existing relationships, they also helped forge new social bonds among women. In many households, women formed close-knit networks of support, friendship, and solidarity. Often facilitated through letter writing, these networks allowed women to share news, seek advice, and express feelings that could not be safely voiced aloud. Through letters, they exchanged stories of hardship, joy, and resilience, creating communal spaces within the confines of their limited social worlds. This shared emotional labor reinforced bonds of trust and care, transforming isolated individuals into interconnected communities. The letters were threads weaving a tapestry of female solidarity that defied the isolating structures around them. The act of writing and receiving secret letters also empowered women to reclaim a degree of control over their lives. While public roles in speech were regulated by patriarchal norms, letter writing was a private domain where women could express opinions, hopes, and fears. This private voice, though hidden, was a powerful assertion of selfhood. The very process of composing a letter, choosing words, metaphors, and symbols allowed women to reflect on their experiences and articulate their identities. In this way, secret letters were not just emotional outlets, but tools of psychological survival and self-definition. They gave women a way to say, "I am here, I feel, I exist," even when the world sought to silence them. Education, where accessible, played a critical role in shaping this emotional lifeline. Women who learned to read and write were better equipped to use secret letters as nuanced instruments of communication and expression. Literacy opened doors to classical literature, poetry, and philosophy, enriching the language and symbolism they employed. It also facilitated more complex and coded correspondence, enabling women to navigate social risks while conveying deep emotional truths. For less literate women, oral transmission of poetry and stories supplemented written letters, expanding the emotional networks within households. The combination of literacy and oral tradition created a dynamic cultural space where feelings could be shared and preserved despite social restrictions. The emotional significance of secret letters extended beyond the individual to affect family dynamics and social cohesion. Letters expressing affection and care helped maintain bonds across distances and generations, reinforcing the continuity of family ties. They also offered a means to negotiate conflicts or misunderstandings, using coded language to soften criticism or seek reconciliation. In some cases, letters facilitated the transmission of cultural values and moral guidance, blending personal sentiment with social expectations. This multifaceted role highlights how secret letters functioned as both personal and social tools, weaving emotional connection into the fabric of family and community life. The use of secret letters as emotional lifelines is perhaps most poignant when you consider the broader context of women's limited mobility and social interaction. In many cases, women's movements were restricted within the household or its immediate vicinity, limiting opportunities for face-to-face contact with friends or relatives. Travel was difficult and often forbidden, especially for married women. Letters became a vital means to circumvent these physical barriers, enabling communication across space and time. The emotional sustenance derived from letter exchange helped women endure isolation, providing comfort and companionship in absence. Historians also note the therapeutic dimension of letter writing for women. The process of articulating feelings, hopes, and fears on paper provided psychological relief and a sense of agency. Writing could transform confusion or pain into something tangible and manageable. The act of creating a secret letter was a form of self-care and emotional processing, offering women a private space for reflection and catharsis. This therapeutic aspect is echoed in many cultures where personal correspondence serves as a tool for coping with hardship, highlighting the universal human need to be heard and understood. Of course, the emotional lifeline provided by secret letters was fragile and contingent. Letters could be lost, delayed, or intercepted, severing connections and amplifying feelings of abandonment. The reliance on trusted intermediaries and the ever-present risk of discovery added layers of uncertainty. Yet, despite these challenges, the practice persisted, sustained by the deep human desire for connection and expression. Secret letters were acts of hope, small flames kept alive in a world that often sought to extinguish them. In this light, the secret letter tradition reveals a profound truth about human resilience. Even in the face of systemic oppression, emotional isolation, and danger, women found ways to reach out, to connect, and to affirm their existence. These fragile notes, hidden in folds of silk or brushstrokes on paper, were lifelines woven from courage and longing. They are echoes of the human heart's refusal to be silenced, a reminder that voice and connection persist even in the quietest of places. So, as you rest tonight, imagine yourself holding one of these delicate letters, feeling the weight of its ink and the strength of its hidden message. Know that within that fragile paper lies a lifeline, a bridge across silence, a testament to love, friendship, and the indomitable spirit of women who dared to speak softly when the world demanded silence. Education in ancient China was a paradoxical force for women, both a rare privilege and a limited opportunity that shaped how secret letters were crafted and understood. Unlike men, whose formal schooling often extended into classical studies and governance, most women's education was confined to the domestic sphere, focusing on virtues like modesty, obedience, and household management. Yet, within these boundaries, literacy became a critical skill, one that offered women a slender but potent thread of autonomy. Learning to read and write, though often limited to elite classes, enabled women to participate in the secret literary world, transforming their letters from simple messages into rich, coded conversations filled with layered meaning. The ability to wield language was not just a practical tool, but a form of subtle power, allowing women to navigate their constrained social roles with grace and complexity. The extent of female literacy varied significantly across regions and social strata, with aristocratic and scholarly families more likely to educate daughters in the classics, poetry, and calligraphy. This education was designed to prepare women for their roles as cultured wives and mothers, capable of managing household affairs and embodying Confucian ideals. Yet, it inadvertently equipped them with the skills needed to craft the intricate secret letters that served as their hidden voices. For many women, letter writing became an extension of their education, a practical application of their studies that transcended mere etiquette and ventured into personal expression. These letters reveal a surprising intellectual engagement, blending classical references with personal sentiment in ways that challenge simplistic notions of women's passivity. In contrast, women from lower social classes often had limited or no formal education, relying instead on oral traditions and practical knowledge. For these women, secret communication might take different forms, such as whispered messages, songs, or simple notes passed through trusted intermediaries. Oral literacy and storytelling supplemented written correspondence, creating a diverse landscape of secret communication shaped by educational access. This disparity highlights how education influenced not only the style and content of secret letters, but also their very existence. The secret literary culture was thus stratified, reflecting broader social inequalities while also offering pathways for emotional connection and agency. The Confucian emphasis on female virtue deeply influenced educational content and social expectations. Women were taught to embody ideals such as filial piety, chastity, and humility, which discouraged overt self-expression or public speaking. Education reinforced these norms by focusing on texts that extolled obedience and sacrifice. Yet, within this framework, the act of secret letter writing emerged as a subtle form of resistance, a way for women to express individuality and emotion without openly defying social codes. The tension between education as a tool of conformity and as a means of private empowerment is central to understanding the secret letter tradition. Women's mastery of language allowed them to conform outwardly while nurturing a hidden world of expression. Calligraphy, taught as part of female education, played a dual role in this dynamic. It was both a marker of refinement and a personal medium for emotional expression. Women's handwriting styles varied, and their brushwork could convey mood and personality, adding a layer of meaning beyond the text. The physical act of writing, its rhythm, pressure, and flow, became a vehicle for conveying subtle feelings. In this way, education in calligraphy was not merely technical training, but a cultivation of aesthetic and emotional sensitivity, enriching the secret letters with visual artistry. The beauty of a letter's script was as important as its words, making literacy a sensory as well as intellectual experience. The process of education itself often took place within female networks, mothers teaching daughters, elder sisters mentoring younger ones, and friendships fostering shared learning. These intimate settings provided not only knowledge but socialization into the norms and nuances of coded communication. Learning to write secret letters was part of this social education, passing down cultural literacy alongside emotional intelligence. Such mentorship strengthened bonds among women and preserved the traditions of secrecy and subtlety that characterized their communication. This communal aspect of education highlights how secret letters were embedded in broader social relationships, reinforcing solidarity and shared identity. However, education was not universally empowering. For many women, it reinforced limitations by framing knowledge within the context of obedience and service. The tension between empowerment and constraint shaped how secret letters were written cautiously, symbolically, and often ambiguously. Women had to balance the desire for authentic expression with the need for discretion, crafting letters that were intelligible only to trusted recipients. This balancing act required not only literacy but a social savvy and emotional intelligence, skills honed through education and experience. The resulting letters are complex texts that reflect the intricate interplay of voice and silence, freedom and repression. Historians debate the degree to which education enabled women to resist patriarchal control through secret letter writing. Some argue that literacy and cultural knowledge offered women a hidden sphere of influence, allowing them to negotiate power within the household and beyond. Others suggest that education primarily served to reinforce existing hierarchies by teaching women to internalize and reproduce dominant values. The secret letter tradition, situated between these perspectives, reveals both the limits and possibilities of female education in a restrictive society. It demonstrates how women use the tools available to them, language, symbolism, and social networks, to create spaces for selfhood and connection. The influence of education also extended to the content and style of secret letters. Educated women incorporated classical poetry, philosophical allusions, and literary conventions into their writing, enriching their letters with cultural depth and elegance. This literary sophistication served multiple purposes. It enhanced the aesthetic appeal of the letters, reinforced shared cultural identity, and provided layers of meaning that protected the letter's true intent. The blending of personal emotion with classical form elevated secret letters from mere messages to works of art, embodying the intellectual and emotional complexity of their writers. This fusion challenges stereotypes of women's passivity and highlights their active engagement with cultural tradition. Furthermore, education shaped the way secret letters circulated within female networks. Literate women often acted as intermediaries, translating, interpreting, or composing letters for less educated peers. This collaborative aspect of letter writing fostered community and collective creativity, ensuring that the tradition transcended individual limitations. The circulation of letters also facilitated the spread of educational and cultural values among women, reinforcing social cohesion and identity. Education, therefore, was not only a personal asset, but a communal resource that sustained the secret letter culture across generations. As you reflect on the role of education in this hidden world, you begin to see how knowledge, though constrained, became a form of subtle power for women. Literacy and cultural learning enabled them to articulate feelings, forge connections, and assert presence within a society that sought to silence them. Secret letters were both products and expressions of this paradox, tools, forged in the fires of limitation, carrying the quiet strength of women's voices across time. They remind us that education is not merely about formal instruction, but about the cultivation of agency, creativity, and resilience, even in the most challenging circumstances. So tonight, as you contemplate the delicate brushstrokes and coded verses of these secret letters, consider the invisible classroom where they were born, the intimate spaces where women learned to write not just words, but worlds. Education shaped their voices, sharpened their pens, and guided their hands, enabling them to weave stories of love, longing, and resistance that still speak softly across the centuries. The influence of Confucian ideals on women's secret letter writing was as profound as it was paradoxical, shaping both the constraints they faced and the creative ways they navigated their silence. Confucianism, with its emphasis on hierarchical order, filial piety, and defined gender roles, created a societal framework that strictly regulated women's behavior and expression. Women were expected to embody virtues such as obedience, modesty, and self-sacrifice, their voices muted in favor of harmony and respect within the family structure. Yet, these very ideals, intended to enforce silence and submission, ironically fueled the rich tradition of secret correspondence as women sought subtle ways to express their feelings, negotiate their positions, and maintain emotional connections. Confucianism's rigid expectations did not extinguish women's voices, they simply forced them into shadows, where coded language and symbolism flourished. At the heart of Confucian thought was the ideal of the 3 obediences and 4 virtues, prescribing that a woman obey her father before marriage, her husband after marriage, and her sons in widowhood, alongside virtues of morality, proper speech, modest manner, and diligent work. These prescriptions severely limited women's public speech and autonomy, making secret letters an act of careful defiance. While overt expression of discontent or desire was taboo, private correspondence allowed women to explore their inner lives within a veil of discretion. The letters became spaces where Confucian ideals were both reinforced and gently contested, blending obedience with personal agency. Women used the very language of virtue and harmony to cloak messages of longing, resistance, or critique, mastering a form of linguistic subtlety that balanced respect with self-expression. Confucianism also valorized literary and artistic refinement as markers of moral character and social status, particularly among the elite. This cultural valorization shaped women's education and letter writing, encouraging mastery of classical poetry, calligraphy, and allusion. Women's secret letters often echoed Confucian texts and classical references, embedding their personal feelings within accepted cultural frameworks. This practice not only safeguarded their messages from suspicion, but also affirmed their place within the moral and intellectual order. The blending of personal emotion with Confucian rhetoric created a layered discourse that was both respectful and intimate, allowing women to communicate complex sentiments under the guise of cultural propriety. Yet, this careful negotiation was fraught with tension. Confucianism's emphasis on social harmony and hierarchical order meant that any breach of prescribed roles risked social censure or punishment. Secret letters, by their nature, transgressed these boundaries, challenging the ideal of silent female obedience. Women's use of metaphor and code can be seen as a form of subtle resistance, asserting emotional presence and autonomy within a constrained social landscape. This tension between compliance and rebellion is central to understanding the secret letter tradition, revealing how women navigated the fine line between acceptance and self-assertion. Their letters were acts of survival, balancing the demands of Confucian virtue with the need for personal voice. The philosophical underpinnings of Confucianism also influenced the themes and styles of secret letters. Concepts such as loyalty, duty, and filial piety permeated correspondence, shaping how women framed their emotions and relationships. Letters often expressed concern for family honor, respect for elders, and commitment to social roles, even when conveying personal longing or dissatisfaction. This fusion of public duty and private feeling reflects the deeply ingrained cultural values that shaped women's lives. Secret letters became sites where the personal and the political intertwined, where emotional expression was mediated through the lens of Confucian ethics. This cultural context made letter writing a complex moral and social act, requiring careful balance and discernment. Interestingly, Confucianism's emphasis on harmony extended to language itself, promoting indirectness, modesty, and understatement as virtues in communication. This cultural preference for subtlety resonated with the coded and metaphorical style of secret letters. Women's use of allusion, symbolism, and poetic imagery aligned with broader aesthetic values that prized elegance and restraint. Their letters were not only protected by secrecy but also by cultural expectations that privileged ambiguity and delicacy. This alignment between secret letter style and Confucian communication norms facilitated women's ability to express themselves within accepted cultural parameters. It also created a shared language of nuance that deepened intimacy between correspondents while maintaining outward decorum. However, the weight of Confucian expectations could also be suffocating, contributing to the emotional complexities reflected in secret letters. Women's letters reveal a spectrum of feelings from acceptance and devotion to sadness, frustration, and quiet defiance. The internalization of Confucian ideals sometimes conflicted with personal desires and experiences, creating tensions that found outlet in coded language. Secret letters became spaces where women could negotiate these contradictions, expressing vulnerability and strength simultaneously. This emotional depth enriches our understanding of the letters, highlighting the psychological and social dimensions of women's lives under Confucianism. The role of Confucianism in shaping secret letters also extended to the broader social structures that govern letter writing and circulation. The hierarchical organization of families and communities influenced who could correspond, how letters were delivered, and which messages were deemed appropriate. Women's networks for letter exchange often mirrored Confucian social relations, reinforcing bonds of loyalty and respect while providing support and solidarity. These networks facilitated the transmission of cultural values and emotional sustenance, integrating secret letters into the fabric of Confucian social life. The interplay between individual expression and social order in secret letter culture reflects the enduring influence of Confucianism on women's communication. Historians continue to explore the complex relationship between Confucianism and women's secret letters, debating the extent to which these letters represent conformity, resistance, or both. Some view secret letters as evidence of women's agency within oppressive systems, using cultural norms to carve out spaces for voice and connection. Others caution against romanticizing these practices, emphasizing the limitations imposed by Confucian ideology. The secret letter tradition embodies this ambivalence, illustrating how women navigated constraints with creativity and resilience. It reveals the dynamic interplay between ideology and lived experience, where silence and speech coexist in intricate balance. So, as you reflect on the delicate brushstrokes of these secret letters, consider how Confucianism's teachings cast long shadows and subtle lights on women's lives. The ideals that sought to bind them also shaped the language and forms through which they found voice. In this paradox lies the quiet power of secret letters, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to adapt, resist, and express itself even within the strictest of frameworks. Tonight, we hear those voices softly echoing through centuries, carried on the wings of Confucian metaphor and coded verse. As you move deeper into the world of secret letters, you discover how these precious messages circulated within intricate networks of women, weaving a hidden social web of trust, solidarity, and shared experience in the confined and often isolating environment of ancient Chinese households. Especially among the elite, women relied heavily on one another to sustain emotional and intellectual life. Secret letters were not simply private exchanges between spouses or family members. They were also conduits for a wider community of women bound by friendship, kinship, and shared circumstance. These networks formed an underground current beneath the rigid patriarchal surface, creating spaces where women could communicate openly, albeit discreetly, and cultivate bonds of mutual support. Imagine a chain of softly folded notes slipping from one hand to another in the dim light of a chamber, each letter carrying whispers of comfort, advice, or shared longing. The exchange of letters among women within the household and between households was a vital aspect of female social life. In large, multi-generational families, women of different ages and statuses might correspond to negotiate relationships, share news, or provide counsel. Mothers wrote to daughters, elder sisters to younger siblings, and close friends to one another, creating a rich tapestry of written communication that transcended the limits of spoken conversation. These correspondences often included poetry, moral guidance, or subtle commentary on household affairs. Framed in the safe language of metaphor and code, through letters, women formed alliances that bolstered their social standing and emotional resilience. Reinforcing networks of care amid the strict hierarchies imposed by society, trusted intermediaries played an essential role in these networks, facilitating the safe delivery and receipt of secret letters. Servants, attendants, and younger relatives often acted as messengers, their loyalty crucial for maintaining the confidentiality of correspondence. The risk involved in carrying such letters meant that trust was paramount. A breach could have serious consequences for all parties involved. Women developed elaborate systems of signals, timing, and concealment to protect the letters during transit. For example, a folded letter might be hidden inside a garment, tucked beneath a hairpin, or concealed within a fan. These practices turned the act of letter delivery into a carefully choreographed ritual, underscoring the high stakes and deep bonds underpinning female communication networks. These letter exchanges were not limited to the immediate household, but extended to connections with natal families and women in other households. Marriage often severed a woman's direct access to her birth family, creating emotional and social distance. Secret letters allowed women to maintain ties with their mothers, sisters, and childhood friends, sharing news, advice, and support across physical and social divides. In some cases, letters served to negotiate family alliances or communicate about dowries, health, and household matters. These correspondences created a dual belonging, where women navigated between their marital and natal worlds, using letters as bridges linking disparate parts of their lives. This duality added complexity to their identities and social roles, reflected in the layered meanings of their secret messages. The circulation of secret letters also facilitated the transmission of cultural values and social norms among women. Through written exchange, women reinforced ideals of propriety, filial piety, and virtue, even as they subtly negotiated the tensions and contradictions within these ideals. Letters often contained moral reflections, advice on conduct, and expressions of loyalty and respect, wrapped in the delicate language of poetry and metaphor. This literary culture created a shared framework that shaped women's understanding of their roles and relationships. At the same time, the private nature of correspondence allowed space for personal expression and emotional authenticity, creating a dynamic interplay between social conformity and individual voice. Regional and class differences influenced the structure and content of these female networks. In urban centers and among aristocratic families, women's letter writing was often more elaborate, infused with classical literary references and artistic calligraphy. These elite networks had greater access to education and resources, enabling sophisticated correspondence that reflected their cultural capital. In rural or lower-class settings, letter exchanges might be simpler, relying more on oral communication, songs, or straightforward notes delivered through trusted messengers. Despite these differences, the fundamental function of secret letters as tools for connection, support, and expression remained consistent across social strata. The diversity of practices highlights the adaptability of female networks to varying social contexts. The existence of these letter networks challenges assumptions about women's isolation in ancient China, revealing instead a vibrant, though hidden, social world. Through correspondence, women maintained social ties, negotiated power dynamics, and cultivated emotional resilience. These networks acted as lifelines, offering companionship and solidarity in environments often marked by restriction and control. Secret letters thus served not only as personal communications but as social glue, sustaining communities of women across time and space. Importantly, these networks also facilitated the mentorship and transmission of knowledge among women. Older or more experienced women guided younger ones in the art of coded writing, calligraphy, and social navigation. This intergenerational exchange preserved the traditions of secret correspondence and reinforced female cultural identity. The process of learning to write and interpret secret letters became a rite of passage, integrating women into supportive communities that extended beyond immediate family. This educational and social function further underscores the communal nature of secret letter culture. The social dynamics within these female networks were complex, shaped by factors such as age, status, and personality. Hierarchies existed, but so did alliances and friendships that transcended formal boundaries. Letters could smooth tensions, mediate conflicts, and strengthen bonds. The emotional labor involved in maintaining these networks was significant, reflecting women's roles as caretakers not only of households but of social relationships. Secret letter writing was a key medium through which this labor was enacted, enabling women to manage and sustain their communities discreetly. Historians continue to uncover the richness of these female networks through surviving letters, diaries, and literary references. While much of the correspondence remains lost or inaccessible, the fragments that survive reveal a world of intimate connection and cultural vitality. These networks highlight women's agency in shaping their social worlds. Even within the confines of patriarchal structures, the secret letter tradition thus emerges not only as a literary phenomenon, but as a social practice that empowered women to claim space and voice. As you imagine the flow of these letters slipping from hand to hand, across rooms and households, you see the delicate web of female connection stretching quietly beneath the formal structures of ancient Chinese society. These networks were sanctuaries of trust and communication, enabling women to sustain their identities and relationships in a world that often sought to contain them. In their secret exchanges, women found companionship, strength, and voice. So tonight, as you rest, let your thoughts wander along the hidden pathways forged by these letters, connecting women across time and space. Their networks of correspondence remind us that even in silence and constraint, human connection endures, whispered softly in the folds of silken paper, carried gently from hand to hand. As you trace the delicate flow of secret letters through ancient China, you begin to notice fascinating regional variations in the ways women composed, concealed, and circulated these precious messages. China's vast geography and diverse cultures shaped the styles, materials, and customs surrounding secret letter writing, creating a rich tapestry of localized practices within the overarching tradition. From the lush, silk-producing south to the rugged, paper-rich north, women adapted their secret correspondence to reflect regional resources, social norms, and aesthetic preferences. These differences not only highlight the adaptability and creativity of women navigating constraints, but also reveal the vibrant complexity of Chinese cultural life across provinces and dynasties. Imagine holding a letter spun from southern silk, its brush strokes flowing with poetic elegance, then comparing it to a sturdy northern paper note marked with precise calligraphy, each a unique window into a particular world. In southern regions, such as Jiangnan, renowned for their silk production and flourishing literati culture, secret letters often took the form of finely woven silk slips or painted fans. The luxurious material itself spoke volumes, conveying status and refinement alongside the content of the message. Women in these areas frequently incorporated elaborate floral motifs and seasonal imagery into their letters, reflecting both local aesthetic tastes and poetic traditions. The soft texture of silk allowed for delicate brushwork and subtle ink gradations, enhancing the emotional nuance embedded in each stroke. This regional emphasis on artistry and material richness elevated secret letters into works of private art, treasured for their beauty as much as their meaning. You can almost feel the cool smoothness of silk between your fingers, carrying whispered secrets wrapped in elegance. In contrast, northern provinces like Hebei and Shanxi, with their abundant access to paper and ink, saw secret letters more commonly written on high-quality paper, often sturdier and larger than their southern counterparts. The northern style emphasized clarity and precision in calligraphy, with bold, measured strokes reflecting the region's cultural values of discipline and order. Letters here might feature more straightforward language, though still layered with metaphor and allusion, and were frequently folded into intricate shapes for concealment. The robust nature of paper allowed for letters to survive longer, which is why many surviving examples come from these regions. The tactile weight of paper, its crisp edges and faint scent of ink, carries a different kind of presence, solid, deliberate, and enduring. Beyond material differences, the social customs surrounding letter writing also varied regionally. In some areas, the exchange of secret letters was closely linked to local marriage rituals and courtship practices, with the letters serving as tokens of betrothal or expressions of affection before formal union. In others, letters functioned primarily as means of maintaining familial ties or navigating household hierarchies. These variations reflect the diverse ways women use secret correspondence to negotiate their roles and relationships within differing cultural contexts. For example, in more conservative northern regions, the risks associated with secret letters might have fostered more coded and cautious writing styles, While southern regions with their flourishing artistic communities encourage more open poetic expression, this regional diversity underscores the dynamic interplay between cultural environment and personal agency in women's letter writing. Dialect and language nuances also played a role in shaping secret letters across regions. While classical Chinese served as the literary standard, local dialects and vernacular expressions occasionally infused letters with regional flavor and intimacy. These linguistic variations added another layer of complexity to the coding and interpretation of letters, requiring correspondents to share not only cultural but also linguistic understandings. Such nuances further limited the audience for secret letters, enhancing their privacy and reinforcing the bonds between writer and reader. The interplay of standard and local language illustrates how secret letters were deeply embedded in specific social and geographic milieus, making each correspondence a unique cultural artifact. Material culture around letter writing, including the use of seals, inks, and decorative elements, also exhibited regional variation. In some southern courts, red cinnabar seals adorn letters, symbolizing authenticity and status, while in northern provinces, simpler stamp marks or personalized emblems serve similar functions. The choice of ink ranging from rich black soot-based ink to colored pigments added symbolic and aesthetic meaning, often reflecting regional artistic trends. These material choices contributed to the identity and meaning of secret letters, intertwining personal expression with cultural tradition. They remind us that secret correspondence was not only a literary practice, but a multi-sensory experience shaped by local craftsmanship and symbolism. The preservation of secret letters, too, reflects regional disparities. Humid southern climates made the survival of delicate silk letters rare, whereas the drier northern environments favored the longevity of paper documents. This uneven preservation has influenced historical understanding, sometimes biasing scholarship toward northern examples and styles. Yet, despite these challenges, both regions contributed richly to the secret letter tradition, each offering distinct voices and textures. Modern efforts to recover and study these letters increasingly recognize the importance of embracing regional diversity to fully appreciate the scope of women's secret correspondence. Interregional exchanges also shaped secret letter culture. Trade routes, marriage alliances, and official appointments brought women into contact with diverse cultural influences, facilitating the circulation of literary styles and letter-writing techniques. For instance, the spread of particular poetic forms or calligraphic styles across provinces illustrates how cultural currents flowed alongside social networks. These exchanges enriched local practices, allowing women to innovate and adapt within the secret letter tradition. The movement of ideas and styles underscores the interconnectedness of Chinese society and the dynamic nature of female expression within it. Despite these regional variations, certain core themes and practices remain consistent throughout China's secret letter culture. The use of metaphor, the balancing of risk and intimacy, and the reliance on trusted networks transcended geographic boundaries. Women everywhere faced similar challenges: social restriction, emotional isolation, and surveillance, and secret letters served as a universal response. This shared tradition connects women across time and place, weaving a silent but resilient thread through China's vast cultural landscape. As you imagine these regional differences, the silken elegance of the South, the sturdy script of the North, you glimpse the rich textures of women's hidden lives. Each letter, shaped by place and culture, carries not only personal sentiment, but the imprint of a unique social world. Together, they form a mosaic of female experience, revealing the diversity and depth of secret letter writing in ancient China. So tonight, as you rest and reflect, picture yourself unfolding a letter wrapped in the warm glow of southern lantern light, or tracing the bold strokes of a northern calligrapher's brush. These letters invite you into worlds shaped by geography and culture, yet united by the enduring human need to connect, to express, and to be heard, even in silence. Calligraphy, far beyond mere penmanship, was the heartbeat of secret letter writing, a living, breathing art form through which women conveyed emotion, intellect, and identity with every graceful stroke. In ancient China, calligraphy was revered as the highest visual art, a reflection of one's moral character and cultural refinement, and women's mastery of this discipline became a vital part of their secret correspondence. Each brushstroke was an intimate extension of the writer's inner world, turning the act of writing into a nuanced performance where the style, pressure, and rhythm communicated layers of meaning beyond the literal text. Imagine the deliberate pauses, the flicks of the wrist, the swelling curves of ink on silk or paper. These were the silent exclamations and tender whispers that animated secret letters, infusing them with personality and emotional depth that mere words could not achieve. For women, calligraphy was both a social skill and a private language. It marked them as cultured and virtuous within the bounds of Confucian society, where the ability to write elegantly was a sign of education and proper upbringing. Yet, in secret letters, calligraphy took on an additional dimension as a coded emotional channel. The same phrase, penned with bold, assertive strokes, could express determination or frustration, while delicate, flowing characters might reveal vulnerability or longing. Variations in ink density, speed, and brush angle subtly conveyed mood and intention, creating a dynamic interplay between form and content. This visual language required the recipient's attentive eye and shared understanding, turning reading into an intimate act of decoding not just words but feeling. Calligraphic style also served as a protective cloak, disguising the letter's true emotional or subversive content beneath a veneer of cultural propriety. Women's letters often conformed outwardly to classical forms and balanced composition, meeting social expectations while masking deeper messages. This dual function of calligraphy as both art and concealment reflects the complex negotiation of identity and expression that secret letters embodied. The artistry of brushwork was a kind of veil, simultaneously inviting admiration and shielding intimacy. A letter's beauty could distract from its hidden meanings, safeguarding the writer and reader from external scrutiny. In addition to style, the choice of script type influenced the letter's emotional tone and social implications. For example, the formal and structured regular script kaishu conveyed respect and decorum, suitable for official or cautious messages, while the more fluid running script shingshu allowed for personal expression and emotional nuance. Cursive script kaoshu, with its spontaneous and abstract strokes, was often reserved for the most intimate and urgent communications, though its complexity also increased the risk of misinterpretation. Women's adeptness at switching among these scripts demonstrated their linguistic skill and emotional intelligence, tailoring their calligraphy to the content and context of each letter. This script versatility further deepened the layers of meaning and discretion in secret correspondence. The physical materials used in calligraphy brushes, inkstones, paper, and silk also contributed to the sensory experience and symbolism of secret letters. The soft, absorbent texture of silk contrasted with the crispness of paper, each influencing brushwork and expression. Ink, traditionally made from soot and animal glue, varied in shade and viscosity, allowing for subtle gradations in texture. The ritual of grinding ink on a stone, mixing it to the desired consistency, was itself a meditative act that connected writer and material in a tactile dialogue. These sensory details enlivened the writing process, transforming letter composition into a deeply embodied practice. The physicality of calligraphy became an extension of the writer's presence, bridging the gap between inner feeling and outer form. Calligraphy's role extended beyond the individual letter to influence the social dynamics of secret correspondence. The quality and style of handwriting could communicate social status, education, and personality, affecting how letters were received and interpreted. A beautifully executed letter might garner admiration and deepen emotional bonds, while a careless or awkward script could diminish the letter's impact or raise suspicion. Women invested significant effort in honing their calligraphic skills, aware that their handwriting was both a personal signature and a social statement. This awareness shaped letter writing as a performative act, balancing authenticity with social expectation. Interestingly, calligraphy also played a part in the concealment and discovery of secret letters. Some women developed subtle calligraphic codes such as particular flourishes or unusual character forms that signaled hidden meanings or warned of danger. Variations in brush pressure or stroke order could serve as markers for the recipient, indicating how to read or interpret the text. This calligraphic ciphering added a layer of security and intimacy, reinforcing trust between correspondents. However, these nuances also required shared literacy and familiarity, limiting the audience to those initiated in the code. The intersection of calligraphy and secrecy underscores the sophistication and artistry embedded in secret letter culture. The cultural significance of calligraphy in secret letters is reflected in surviving examples, which are prized not only for their textual content but as masterpieces of brushwork. Museums and private collections treasure these artifacts as testimonies to women's artistic and emotional lives, preserving the delicate balance of beauty and meaning they embody. Calligraphy in secret letters invites us to appreciate writing as a multi-sensory experience, where visual form and linguistic content merge to create a unique mode of expression. It reminds us that communication is not only about what is said, but how it is said, with every stroke carrying the weight of history, feeling, and identity. Calligraphy's intimate connection to the writer's body and mind also imbues secret letters with a sense of presence and immediacy. The fluidity of brushwork captures the tempo of emotion, the hesitation, urgency, or calm of the moment, offering readers a glimpse into the writer's state of being. This embodied quality transforms letters from static text into living conversations. Bridging temporal and spatial distances, the experience of reading such letters becomes a dialogue across time, where the brushstrokes resonate as echoes of a personal voice that defied silence. Moreover, calligraphy in secret letters served as a medium for women to assert their intellectual and artistic identities within restrictive social frameworks. Mastery of calligraphy allowed women to participate, albeit privately, in the rich literary culture of their time, claiming space for self-expression and creativity. This participation challenged notions of female passivity and invisibility, revealing a dynamic interplay between cultural conformity and individual agency. Secret letters thus stand as monuments to women's resilience and ingenuity, where art and emotion converge in coded beauty. As you imagine the delicate dance of brush and ink on fragile silk or paper, consider how each stroke was a whispered assertion of presence, a brushstroke of defiance, and a gesture of connection. Calligraphy transforms secret letters into sacred objects, artifacts of hidden lives, emotional depth, and enduring voice. Tonight, their elegant curves and flowing lines invite you to witness the intimate conversations carried silently across centuries, preserved in ink and spirit. As you linger in the quiet world of secret letters, you begin to see how these hidden messages intertwine deeply with the traditions of poetic courtship and matchmaking, becoming more than mere private correspondence, but essential threads in the social fabric of romantic and familial negotiation. In ancient China, marriage was not only a personal or familial affair, but a ritualized process laden with symbolism and ceremony, where poetry and letter writing played pivotal roles in shaping relationships before, during, and after union. Secret letters acted as subtle courtship tokens, whispered promises and veiled declarations exchanged between prospective lovers or intermediaries, wrapped in layers of metaphor and cultural references. These letters allowed women, whose voices were often muted in public, to participate actively in the dance of attraction, desire, and negotiation, crafting their own narratives within the strict codes of propriety. Courtship poetry, steeped in classical imagery and allusion, was a primary language of romantic expression and communication. Women and men used poems and letters to convey feelings too delicate or socially risky to be spoken openly, embedding affection, longing, and subtle flirtation in verses that adhered to aesthetic and moral norms. The secret letters exchanged during courtship were often highly stylized, drawing from established poetic forms such as the sigh and fu, and laden with symbols like the plum blossom signifying resilience, or the moon symbolizing reunion to communicate layers of emotion. This poetic dialogue functioned both as a test of literary refinement and emotional compatibility, with the ability to compose and interpret such letters reflecting education, sensitivity, and social standing. The courtship letters thus became a private stage where the lovers' intellects and hearts intertwined, all within a socially acceptable framework. Matchmakers, crucial agents in arranging marriages, also played a role in the circulation and composition of secret letters. These intermediaries often facilitated letter exchanges between families and prospective spouses, helping to negotiate terms and convey sentiments that could not be publicly discussed. Women, through secret correspondence, might communicate their feelings or preferences indirectly via matchmakers or trusted messengers, influencing decisions behind the scenes. In this way, Secret letters became instruments of agency, allowing women to shape their marital futures in subtle but meaningful ways. The matchmaker's role highlights the layered social network supporting letter writing, where personal emotion intersected with communal expectation and negotiation. The use of secret letters in courtship extended beyond romantic expression to encompass social rituals and gift-giving practices. Letters were often accompanied by symbolic gifts such as embroidered handkerchiefs, fans, or strands of silk, each item carrying additional layers of meaning and intent. These tokens, together with the letters, formed a rich, symbolic language of courtship that communicated desire, respect, and commitment. The careful selection and presentation of gifts and letters reflected the intricate etiquette governing romantic interaction, where every gesture was weighted with significance. This ritualized exchange underscored the delicate balance between personal emotion and social formality in the marriage process. In some cases, secret letters documented the negotiation of marriage contracts, dowries, and family alliances, blending personal and economic concerns. Women's correspondence could include veiled discussions of financial arrangements or family expectations, revealing their involvement in what were ostensibly male-dominated negotiations. The letters thus provide evidence of women's participation in shaping the material and social terms of marriage, even if indirectly. This aspect complicates simplistic views of women as passive actors, showing how secret correspondence enabled them to exercise influence within constrained roles. The interplay of love, duty, and negotiation in secret letters also reflects the broader cultural tensions surrounding marriage in ancient China. While marriage was idealized as a harmonious union reflecting Confucian virtues, the lived experience often involved negotiation, conflict, and compromise. Secret letters captured these complexities, articulating both hope and anxiety, affection and obligation. The dual nature of letters as romantic expression and social instrument reveals how women navigated the conflicting demands of personal desire and familial duty. Their correspondence is thus a window into the emotional politics of marriage, where secrecy was both protection and performance. Historians debate the extent to which secret letters in courtship influenced the outcomes of marriages. Some argue that women's coded messages could sway decisions, foster affection, or mitigate conflicts, highlighting their agency within patriarchal systems. Others caution that these letters often reinforced existing hierarchies and norms, functioning within rather than against social constraints. Regardless, the presence of secret letters in courtship rituals underscores their significance as cultural artifact sites where personal and social narratives intertwined in complex and meaningful ways. The poetic courtship tradition also shaped the language and style of secret letters after marriage. Women continued to use poetic metaphor and allusion to express love, longing, and sometimes critique, maintaining a literary continuity that linked courtship and marital correspondence. This ongoing poetic dialogue created a sustained emotional and intellectual engagement within marriage, enriching relationships beyond formal roles. The persistence of poetic style in letters reflects the enduring cultural value placed on literary refinement and emotional subtlety in female expression. As you imagine these secret courtship letters, silken slips, bearing coded verses, fragrant with ink and hope, you glimpse a world where women's voices, though constrained, found artful expression. The letters are tender echoes of desire, negotiation, and social artistry, testifying to the vibrant complexity of female agency. They reveal how love and language intertwined, shaping lives and relationships within a delicate dance of secrecy and tradition. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, picture these poetic exchanges weaving invisible threads between hearts, carrying whispers of hope and longing through time. The secret letters invite you to listen closely to the silences between lines, to the coded language of love, and to the enduring human quest for connection amidst constraint. As you continue to explore the delicate world of secret letters, you realize that beneath their gentle poetry and coded language often lay subtle acts of protest and resistance, veiled critiques aimed at patriarchal authority and rigid social structures. These letters were not merely vessels of affection and longing, but also platforms for expressing dissatisfaction, frustration, and sometimes quiet defiance. Women, bound by Confucian norms that demanded obedience and silence, used metaphor, allegory, and symbolism to voice concerns about their treatment, household power dynamics, and societal constraints without openly challenging authority. This coded protest was a form of survival, a way to assert identity and agency within oppressive systems. Imagine a letter where the wilting flower symbolizes a woman's fading spirit, or a trapped bird in a cage hints at her constrained existence, expressions of resistance couched in poetic subtlety. These veiled critiques often targeted specific figures of authority within the household, such as domineering husbands, in-laws, or elders who enforced strict discipline or imposed unjust demands. Letters might allude to neglect, cruelty, or unfair treatment, using symbolic language to avoid detection while communicating emotional truths to trusted recipients. This indirect approach allowed women to maintain appearances of compliance while nurturing a private sphere of dissent. The act of writing such letters required courage and discretion, as discovery could result in punishment or social disgrace. The risk underscored the importance of coded language, turning secret correspondence into a delicate dance of expression and concealment. Beyond personal grievances, some secret letters contained broader critiques of gender roles and societal expectations. Women used allegory and historical references to question the fairness of prescribed virtues or the burden of silence imposed upon them. For instance, allusions to legendary heroines who suffered injustice, or to natural elements symbolizing freedom and constraint, could serve as metaphors for women's own experiences. These subtle narratives challenge dominant ideologies, inviting reflection and empathy within trusted networks. Such letters reveal an intellectual engagement with social issues and a desire for change, even if expressed cautiously. The theme of coded protest in secret letters also extended to reflections on marriage itself. Some correspondences questioned the institution's limitations, expressing feelings of entrapment or the loss of personal freedom. Women might lament the emotional distance from their husbands or the sacrifices demanded by family duty. These critiques, though veiled, reveal the complexities of women's relationships to marriage and highlight the tensions between societal ideals and lived realities. Secret letters thus become archives of female subjectivity, preserving voices that resisted simplistic portrayals of acquiescence. The use of symbolism and metaphor in protest letters was sophisticated, requiring shared cultural literacy among correspondents. This ensured that critiques remained intelligible to intended readers while remaining obscure to outsiders. The shared knowledge of literary allusions, historical anecdotes, and poetic conventions created a coded language of resistance that reinforced bonds of trust and solidarity. This layered communication underscores the intellectual and emotional depth of women's secret letters, revealing how language became a tool of empowerment within constraints. Historians debate the impact of these veiled critiques on social change. While some view secret letters as isolated acts of personal expression with limited public effect, others argue that they contributed to the gradual evolution of gender roles and social norms by fostering private discourse and solidarity. The letters provided spaces where women could articulate alternative perspectives and imagine different possibilities, sowing seeds of change within conservative societies. Whether or not these seeds bore immediate fruit, the very existence of coded protest highlights the resilience and creativity of women's voices. The dual nature of secret letters as expressions of love and longing, but also of protest and resistance, reflects the multifaceted realities of women's lives. These letters embody contradictions, compliance intertwined with defiance, vulnerability alongside strength, silence and speech entwined. This complexity enriches our understanding of the secret letter tradition, revealing it as a dynamic site of emotional, intellectual, and social negotiation. The courage involved in writing protest letters, often hidden within the safer language of poetry and metaphor, demonstrates women's agency in shaping their narratives. Even when constrained by oppressive structures, they found ways to articulate dissatisfaction and assert dignity. These acts of quiet rebellion resonate across time, reminding us that resistance often takes subtle forms, whispered rather than shouted. As you imagine the careful crafting of such letters, each brushstroke a careful balance of meaning and concealment, you witness a profound human struggle for voice and justice. Secret letters were not only instruments of connection, but also of empowerment, allowing women to claim spaces of expression within silence. Tonight, as you rest, let these hidden protests echo softly in your mind, whispers of resilience and hope carried through centuries. They invite you to listen beyond the surface, to hear the unspoken courage embedded in delicate verses, and to honor the enduring spirit of those who dared to speak softly against silence. As you peer through the veil of time, certain historical figures emerge whose secret letters shaped not only personal destinies, but also left ripples on the broader canvas of history. These women, often trapped within the rigid frameworks of their era, wielded their pens as subtle instruments of influence, communication, and resistance, turning fragile scraps of paper into powerful testimonies of their lives and times. Some letters reveal whispered political intrigues, clandestine alliances, or personal appeals that affected decisions far beyond the confines of domestic spaces. Through their correspondence, these women carved out legacies that survive in archives and folklore, illuminating the profound impact of secret letter writing on history's course. One such notable example is Kai Wenji, a celebrated poet and musician of the late Eastern Han Dynasty. Though her story predates much of the secret letter tradition, her letters and poems encapsulate the deep emotional expression and resilience that later became hallmarks of women's secret correspondence, kidnapped and held captive during turbulent times. Kai Wenji's letters express longing for home, sorrow, and hope. Her writings bridge personal grief and historical upheaval, demonstrating how women's voices, though often hidden, could resonate powerfully across generations. Her legacy inspired countless women to adopt writing as a means of articulating complex inner lives amid adversity. Another figure, Ban Zhao, the renowned female historian and scholar of the Han Dynasty, contributed to the education and empowerment of women through her works. While primarily a public intellectual, Ban Zhao's letters and teachings influenced the literate women who followed, shaping the secret letter culture by emphasizing the importance of education, moral conduct, and literary skill. Her advocacy for female literacy laid groundwork for women's increased participation in literary and cultural life, indirectly fostering the growth of secret correspondence as a medium for private expression. Ban Zhao's example exemplifies how individual women could transcend societal limitations and inspire collective transformation. In the Tang Dynasty, Princess Taiping's correspondence reveals a more direct engagement with political affairs. Though much of her political influence was exerted through official channels, surviving letters hint at her strategic use of private communication to maneuver within the male-dominated imperial court. Her secret letters, often addressed to allies and family members, combined personal sentiment with political calculation, illustrating how women in power could harness secret correspondence to negotiate authority. Princess Taiping's example highlights the multifaceted roles secret letters played not only as emotional outlets, but as tools of political agency. During the Song Dynasty, the poetess Li Qingzhao's letters and poems stand as poignant examples of personal loss and emotional depth articulated through literary mastery. Her secret correspondences, marked by exquisite calligraphy and metaphor, convey the pain of separation, political turmoil, and shifting fortunes. Li Qingzhao's writings reveal how secret letters functioned as both private consolation and public literary achievement, bridging personal experience with cultural expression. Her enduring fame attests to the power of female literary voices nurtured within secret correspondence traditions. Other historical accounts tell of women whose secret letters revealed acts of courage and defiance. For example, during times of war and social upheaval, some women used correspondence to relay intelligence, coordinate aid, or protect loved ones. These letters carried risk, but also demonstrated the vital roles women played in sustaining communities and resistance movements, often operating in the shadows. Such stories challenge stereotypes of women's passivity, highlighting their active engagement in historical events through secret communication. The survival of these letters is itself remarkable, given the fragility of materials and the secrecy that surrounded them. Many were lost, destroyed, or hidden away for generations, only to be rediscovered in archives, private collections, or as quoted in other literary works. Their preservation offers invaluable insights into women's perspectives, emotional lives, and social roles, voices too often marginalized in official histories. Each recovered letter is a precious window into the past, illuminating the resilience and creativity of women who wrote despite the constraints imposed upon them. These historical examples underscore the diversity and complexity of secret letter writing as both personal and political practice. Whether expressing intimate emotion, negotiating marriage alliances, or influencing political affairs, secret letters were versatile tools through which women navigated their worlds. They reveal a continuum of female agency, from subtle self-expression to overt political engagement, mediated by language, culture, and circumstance. The stories of these women invite us to reconsider the boundaries between public and private, personal and political, silence and speech. Their letters remind us that history is not only shaped by grand events and prominent figures, but also by the quiet words exchanged in hidden spaces, letters folded in silk, brushed with care, and carried with trust. These whispered voices across centuries connect us to the enduring human quest for connection, identity, and influence. As you reflect on these lives, imagine the trembling hands that wrote letters under candlelight, the anxious moments awaiting replies, and the courage embedded in every stroke of ink. These women's secret correspondences were acts of survival, resistance, and love threads woven into the fabric of history that continue to speak softly to us today. So tonight, as you rest, hold these stories close, honoring the power of the hidden word and the women who wielded it with grace and strength. Their letters are gift across time whispers that refuse to be silenced, carrying the weight of history and the lightness of hope. As you continue along this quiet journey, you begin to notice the gradual decline of secret letter writing in ancient China, a slow fading influenced by profound social, political, and technological changes that reshape the very fabric of daily life and communication. For centuries, these secret letters had been vital lifelines, artistic expressions, and subtle rebellions within the constraints of patriarchal society. Yet, by the late imperial period and into the modern era, factors such as increased literacy, the spread of printing technology, and shifting social structures began to transform how women communicated, gradually rendering the delicate tradition of secret letters less central. This decline was not sudden but a complex and uneven process, reflecting broader historical currents and the changing roles of women in Chinese society. Imagine the last silken slip folded away quietly, replaced by new forms of expression and connection, signaling the end of an era and the beginning of another. One major driver of this decline was the expansion of education and literacy, particularly during the late Qing dynasty and early Republican era. As formal schooling became more accessible, especially in urban centers, women gained new means of communication and self-expression beyond secret letters. Printed books, newspapers, and magazines introduced new literary forms and public discourse that encouraged more direct and open female voices. While these developments offered unprecedented opportunities, they also diminished the need for clandestine correspondence, as women began to participate more visibly in literary and social arenas. The secret letter, once essential for privacy and protection, became less relevant in a world where female literacy and public engagement were increasing. Technological advances, especially the introduction of printing and later telegraphy and telephony, also transformed communication practices. The ability to produce multiple copies of text and send messages quickly over distances challenged the exclusivity and intimacy of handwritten secret letters. Women adapted to these new media in various ways, but the personalized, coded artistry of secret correspondence was difficult to replicate in mass communication. The tactile and sensory dimensions of brush on silk or paper, the intimate connection between writer and material were replaced by more impersonal technologies. This shift marked a cultural transition, where personal secret exchanges gave way to more public and standardized communication, altering the social meanings attached to letter writing. Social and political upheavals in the 19th and early 20th centuries further accelerated changes in women's roles in communication. Movements for women's rights, education reform, and political participation challenged traditional Confucian norms and patriarchal authority. Women increasingly engaged in public activism, education, and literary production, often using new forms of written expression such as essays, journals, and novels. These developments opened spaces for female voices to be heard openly, reducing reliance on coded and secret correspondence. Yet, the legacy of secret letters persisted as a cultural memory and symbolic resource, informing contemporary understandings of female expression and agency. At the same time, the decline of secret letter writing reflected shifts in family and household structures. The traditional extended family, which had provided the social context for much secret correspondence, gradually gave way to more nuclear family arrangements, urbanization, and changing domestic norms. Women's social networks evolved accordingly. with new forms of friendship, education, and communication emerging. The intimate household spheres where secret letters flourished became less central to women's lives, altering patterns of interaction and emotional support. This transformation highlights the close relationship between social organization and communication practices. Despite these changes, the cultural resonance of secret letters remained significant. Literary and historical works continued to reference the tradition, evoking its artistry, emotional depth, and symbolic power. Secret letters became motifs in poetry, fiction, and scholarship, embodying nostalgia for a lost world of intimate, coded female expression. This cultural memory preserved the values and meanings associated with secret correspondence, even as its practice waned. In some cases, elements of secret letter culture were adapted or revived in modern literary and artistic expressions, connecting past and present through shared themes of voice, silence, and resistance. The decline of secret letter writing also reflected broader tensions between tradition and modernity in Chinese society. While modernization brought expanded opportunities for women, it also disrupted established cultural forms and social bonds. The disappearance of secret letters marked both loss and transformation, the fading of a delicate art and the emergence of new modes of communication and identity. Understanding this decline enriches our appreciation of the secret letter tradition as a dynamic cultural phenomenon, deeply embedded in historical context and human experience. As you imagine the last flickers of this tradition, the final carefully folded letters, the last whispered exchanges, you sense a poignant passage of time. The world that nurtured secret correspondence was changing irrevocably, yet the echoes of those letters linger in memory, art, and spirit. They remind us that cultural practices evolve, but the human need for connection and expression endures. So tonight, as you rest, consider the delicate beauty and profound meaning of these fading whispers. The decline of secret letters invites us to cherish the fragile threads of history and to honor the enduring human voice, whether loud or soft, that continues to seek expression across the ages. As you draw closer to the present, you begin to perceive the profound legacy that ancient secret letters have etched into modern Chinese culture, resonating through contemporary forms of female expression and private communication. Though the delicate tradition of secret letter writing has largely faded, its spirit persists in new modes, texts, emails, social media messages, and other intimate forms of connection that continue to negotiate voice and silence in complex social landscapes. The coded metaphors, nuanced language, and emotional depth that once characterized secret correspondence live on in modern practices, reflecting an ongoing dialogue between tradition and change. Imagine the soft glow of a phone screen replacing the flickering candle, fingers dancing across keys instead of brushes on silk, yet the yearning to connect, to be heard, and to speak softly beneath the watchful eyes of society remains undiminished. Modern Chinese women, much like their ancestors, often navigate social expectations, family pressures, and cultural norms that shape how and what they communicate. While educational opportunities and public roles have expanded dramatically, tensions persist around female voice and agency, particularly in personal relationships and family dynamics. The language of indirectness, coded expression, and emotional nuance continues to influence communication styles, echoing the poetic and metaphorical tones of secret letters. Social media platforms and private messaging apps serve as new arenas where women craft layered messages, sometimes playful, sometimes guarded, that blend personal emotion with social diplomacy. These digital dialogues are contemporary manifestations of the age-old balance between speech and silence. The legacy of secret letters also endures in the literary and artistic imagination. Contemporary writers, poets, and visual artists draw inspiration from the tradition, weaving themes of hidden voices, coded language, and intimate correspondence into their works. Novels and films explore the tensions between public expectation and private desire, often evoking the symbolic power of letters as carriers of memory, identity, and resistance. Calligraphy and traditional arts remain valued for their expressive potential, and their revival in modern contexts reflects an enduring appreciation for the aesthetic and emotional dimensions of written expression. Through these cultural productions, The secret letter tradition is both preserved and reinterpreted, connecting past and present. Furthermore, the concept of secret letters informs contemporary discussions about gender, communication, and power in Chinese society. Scholars and activists examine how historical forms of female expression illuminate ongoing struggles for voice and autonomy. The metaphor of the hidden letter serves as a powerful symbol for women's negotiation of visibility and invisibility, authority and vulnerability. By tracing this lineage, modern movements articulate continuities and ruptures in women's experiences, highlighting the complex interplay of tradition and modernity. The secret letter becomes more than a historical artifact. It is a lens through which to understand contemporary social dynamics. In family life, echoes of secret letter culture appear in patterns of communication and emotional labor. Women often mediate relationships, manage conflicts, and sustain social bonds through nuanced verbal and nonverbal cues, reflecting the subtlety of coded correspondence. Generational transmissions of stories, advice, and cultural values continue to rely on indirectness and metaphor, maintaining a connection to ancestral modes of expression. These practices underscore the ongoing significance of emotional literacy and discretion in social interaction, highlighting how historical communication strategies shape everyday life. The interplay of technology and tradition also raises new questions about privacy, expression, and connection. Digital communication offers unprecedented immediacy and reach, but also challenges around surveillance, censorship, and self-censorship. In this context, the spirit of secret letters, coded language, trust networks, and the balancing of speech and silence remains relevant. Women creatively navigate these complexities, crafting messages that protect intimacy while engaging with broader publics. This negotiation echoes the historical tensions embedded in secret correspondence, illustrating the persistence of cultural memory in shaping contemporary communication. Moreover, educational curricula increasingly incorporate studies of women's historical writings, including secret letters, fostering awareness and appreciation of female voices long marginalized. By bringing these stories into classrooms and public discourse, societies recognize the value of diverse narratives and the importance of reclaiming silenced histories. This academic revival contributes to cultural identity and empowers new generations to explore the connections between past and present expression. As you contemplate these modern reflections of an ancient tradition, you see how secret letters are not relics, but living legacies woven into the fabric of contemporary life and culture. They remind us that the quest for voice, connection, and understanding transcends time, adapting to new forms while retaining core human desires. The delicate brushstrokes of silk letters resonate in the digital taps of screens, carrying forward a lineage of resilience, creativity, and hope. So tonight, as you rest, imagine the continuum of female expression stretching from hidden ink to glowing pixels, a river of whispered words flowing across centuries. This legacy invites you to honor the enduring power of voice in all its forms, and to listen deeply to the quiet conversations that shape our shared humanity. As you reach the twilight of this journey through whispered histories, it's impossible not to reflect on the enduring tension between imposed silence and the human yearning to be heard, a tension that secret letters embody with exquisite subtlety. Across centuries, women in ancient China lived under strict social codes that demanded their obedience and quietude, yet their hearts and minds refused confinement. Through secret correspondence, they carved out hidden spaces where voice and silence intertwined, revealing the paradox of their existence: silenced yet expressive, invisible yet deeply present. This delicate dance between repression and expression is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a silent chorus echoing through the folds of time, inviting us to listen closely to the voices once forced into shadows. The secret letters themselves serve as poignant symbols of this tension. Each carefully folded note, each brushstroke laden with metaphor, represents a duality: words meant to communicate yet to conceal, to connect yet to protect. They encapsulate the contradictions faced by women who sought to navigate societal expectations without sacrificing personal identity. These letters were not merely practical communications, but embodied acts of resistance and affirmation, affirming presence in a world that sought erasure. The paradox is beautiful and haunting silence was enforced. But in that very silence, women's voices found new forms and depths, whispering truths that could not be spoken aloud. This tension between silence and voice extends beyond historical curiosity. It resonates deeply in contemporary reflections on gender, power, and communication. The legacy of secret letters challenges us to reconsider notions of voice not merely as audible speech, but as complex, layered expression that includes silence, gesture, and coded language. It prompts awareness of the ways societal structures continue to shape who can speak, how, and when. The delicate artistry of secret correspondence becomes a metaphor for the ongoing struggle to balance self-expression with social constraints, a reminder that voice is multifaceted and often contested. Within this framework, the act of writing itself gains profound significance. For women crafting secret letters, writing was an act of survival and self-assertion, a means to claim subjectivity amid objectifying systems. The physicality of brush and ink, the ritual of folding and concealing, the intimate knowledge shared with trusted readers, all these elements transform writing into a sacred practice. Writing was not just communication, but a reclamation of agency, a way to weave identity through words despite external pressures. This understanding enriches our appreciation of literature, art, and history, highlighting how marginalized voices find expression in unexpected forms. Moreover, the social networks that sustain secret correspondence underscore the communal dimensions of voice and silence. Women's relationships, whether familial, friendly, or collegial, were vital to the creation, transmission, and interpretation of secret letters. These networks provided trust, protection, and emotional sustenance, enabling women to speak safely within shared cultural codes. The collective nature of this practice challenges individualistic notions of voice, emphasizing the relational context in which expression occurs. It reveals how silence and speech are negotiated within communities, shaped by bonds of trust and shared understanding. The emotional richness embedded in secret letters also speaks to universal human experiences of love, longing, resistance, and hope. Though bound by particular cultural and historical circumstances, the feelings conveyed transcend time and place, connecting us to the intimate interiority of women long silenced in public records. Their letters invite empathy and reflection, offering glimpses into lives lived with courage and creativity. This emotional legacy enriches our humanity, reminding us that voice is not only political, but profoundly personal. In contemplating these letters, we also confront the limitations of historical knowledge, the gaps, losses, and silences in the archival record. Much of women's secret correspondence was ephemeral, destroyed, or hidden, leaving us to piece together fragments and echoes. This absence itself is a form of silence imposed by history, challenging us to listen carefully to what remains and to acknowledge what is missing. The effort to recover and honor these voices is an act of justice and remembrance, expanding our understanding of the past and its complexities. As your thoughts drift with the fading light, consider the metaphor of the secret letter as a fragile vessel carrying hidden depths, traversing unseen paths, and bridging silence and speech. This vessel carries not only the words of women past, but also the enduring human desire to be known, to connect, and to assert existence. It embodies the paradox of silence as both constraint and possibility, absence and presence. So tonight, as you close your eyes and settle into rest, let the soft echoes of these secret letters envelop you. May their whispered voices soothe and inspire, reminding you that even in the quietest corners, the human spirit finds ways to speak and to be heard. Their legacy invites you to honor the power of silence and voice, and to carry forward the delicate art of listening with compassion and depth. Now that our journey through the hidden world of secret letters comes to a close, let your mind soften and your heart open to the gentle lessons they offer. These letters, fragile and fleeting, carry the weight of centuries and the whispers of countless women who found ways to speak beneath silence. They remind us that voice is not only about sound, but about presence, about the courage to express oneself even when the world demands quiet. As you drift deeper into rest, imagine the delicate brushstrokes fading softly, the folded slips of silk resting gently in shadows, and the voices behind them settling into peaceful stillness. Know that these whispered histories live on in the quiet spaces of our lives, inviting patience, understanding, and kindness toward all who seek to be heard. May this gentle reflection accompany you through the night, a soothing murmur reminding you of resilience, connection, and the enduring power of the human spirit. Sleep well.